Hello, we have some people coming in. Thank you so much for being here today. I see Amanda, Deanna, Diane, Abby, Blanca. Hey guys, how are you doing? While you're all getting settled in, just put in that chat over there what you're looking to get out of today. We're so excited to welcome you to this webinar. We'll get started in just a minute. We'll just get a couple more people in here, but feel free to drop in what you're looking for today in that chat. Feel free to drop a emoji, a react, however you're feeling today. I'll do one too. And we'll get started shortly. We're also recording this, so we will be sending this afterwards so that everyone can have it. Abby, thank you for putting that in the chat. Looking for new ways to leverage my neurodivergent superpowers. I love that. I love that. Sarah agrees. Amanda, I am an ADHD project manager and felt specifically called out by the existence of this session. I 100% correct. Agree. We were having our tech check yesterday and it was the most heart-fulfilling thing in here. We have Kate, thank you for this, as neurodivergent EA, always happy to explore multiple ways to explore new ways to juggle tasks. That's great. We'll definitely be addressing some of those today. I see here, FYI, I also felt called out, so here I am. Everyone's excited, community. That is one of the reasons I wanted to build this today, was to build the community together. Oh, Nathan. Hi, Nathan. Yeah, he said you recently realized you were neurodivergent and you're exploring. That's the same thing. Same thing I did. All right. So I feel like we have a good amount of people in right now. So we'll get started today. So welcome to the panel. This is Masterminds, Project Management Tips for Neurodivergence. I am Zan Griffin, she, her, and I'm your host for today's panel. We are so thrilled to have you for this important conversation. I feel like it's a topic that not a lot of people talk about. So I'm so excited to have you all here. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Asana Ambassador Program is, why we're all here. Then we're going to move into a little bit of agenda overview. And then we'll do a little bit of housekeeping and we'll get kicked off. So a couple of quick notes before we get started. For those that don't know, Asana is an absolutely lovely project management tool that I love to use. Myself and some of the other nerds here today are part of the Asana Ambassador Program, which is really easy to join, and they welcome all levels of familiarity. You can have access to additional resources. You can host events like this. If you are looking to connect more to the community that uses Asana, we will drop the link into the chat right now. So feel free to look at that because that's how this program came to be today. So I want to go over quickly our agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about a community agreement. We're going to go through all of our panelists right here. They're amazing. I'm so excited to share them with you. We're going to talk through the importance of inclusivity in the workforce. We have some practical organization tips, which I think, apologies for that, which I think is what everyone is here for. We're going to go through how to actually advocate for change and for yourself in the workplace. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A. Feel free to drop any questions in either the chat or in that question and answer session, because there's a lot of people. Try to drop them in the questions so that we keep track of them and we can answer them as we go. But let's move on into our community statement today. So when I was doing some research for this, the Stanford Neurodiversity Project actually states that neurodiversity is a concept that regards individuals with differences in brain function and behavioral traits as being a part of the normal variation in the human population. So as we move through today, let's just remember that neurodivergence looks different for everyone. Not everyone believes in being diagnosed. Not everyone believes that there are disabilities or even disorders. Frankie will have something that he would like to say on that on his blog post as well. Your experience may not align with others, and that's totally okay. Let's be open-minded, respectful, keep learning, and keep growing from each other today. So a little bit more about me. I am a director of marketing with over a decade of project management experience. I previously saved my team about 3 years worth of repetitive tasks through utilizing Asana. That was something like 247 project requests with our estimated time to completion were then able to be moved to self-service. So Asana definitely is incredibly powerful, especially the template and really look at the organization of your whole project. And just a fun fact about me, I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. I am navigating what being vocal about that means for my career and for my community. And I also chose a narwhal for my celebration at the bottom here because I didn't know they existed. I thought they were like unicorns. Moving on to our panelists, Claire. Claire Martin is an HR professional with 8 years of talent acquisition, DEI, and program management experience. She's an absolute amazing advocate for accessibility, neuroinclusion, and mental health. Also, a fantastic public speaker. Being able to connect with others and raising awareness through storytelling is her thing. So, Claire, do you want to say hi real quick?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here and talk with all of you.
Awesome. Let's move on to Frankie. So Frankie is a creative project manager, a TEDx speaker, and a co-founder of the Good Listening Project, which is a nonprofit that cultivates psychological safety in healthcare. Frankie is autistic, and he has a neologism called disorder. And there's a blog post here if you would be interested in checking that out. Please check that out. It is one of the things that drew me to Frankie in the beginning because he's such a eloquent speaker on the topic. Frankie, do you want to say hi real quick?
Thank you, Zand. And thank you for putting this together. Thanks everybody for being here. And I'm always happy to talk about disorder versus disorder because autism is not a disorder.
Love that. Let's move on to Erica. Erica is project management team lead with over 12 years of combined marketing and project management experience. With an ADHD diagnosis early on at 15, she thrives in bringing clarity to chaos amongst creative and strategy-led teams, especially when using Asana. And Erica, I also want to mention, is also a part of that Asana ambassador course.
Hey, everybody. Good to see so many faces, some new, some familiar. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Anne, for hosting.
Absolutely. All right, let's move into the good stuff. Let's start with why neuroinclusivity matters in the workforce. So one of the things I found out while I was doing some research on this, because like I mentioned, I am fairly new to my diagnosis. I was diagnosed about 2 months ago or so, and then immediately just started running around screaming about it on the internet. So I found that there's 15 to 20% people are considered neurodivergent in the global population. And this is a stat that's referenced a lot. It's actually a composite figure. So it's very likely that can be much higher because it also only includes certain neurodivergencies in some of the studies. So there's this huge stigma out there that we cannot do the same work or that we have superpowers, which on both sides can create unrealistic expectations. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this today was because I felt alone when I started figuring this out, and I wanted to really talk to people about how to be more successful in the workplace. And one of the things that I saw was being very open and transparent about project management and how you're going through and organizing work. So I also wanted to bring up this quick little report. Deloitte put this together, and it really talks about having a diverse workforce that encourages creativity overall. The gist of it is that neuroinclusion is better, including people and having a diverse workforce in general is just much better. But we still have a much longer way to go to actually include those people into our workforce in a inclusive way. So part of that reason why people haven't necessarily pushed forward a neurodiversity program in their organizations is because there's this inherent belief that some believe that inherent characteristics of neurodiverse individuals makes them especially well suited for certain types of tasks that are repetitive in nature and do not require much social interaction. things like coding or administrative functions. And I want to hear from you and our panelists. Do you believe that neurodivergent individuals can excel at tasks that involve social interaction? So drop in that chat and you think yes, heck no, maybe, not sure. And we'll invite our panelists now to start sharing their opinions on it as well. So as people no, go ahead, Erica.
I was going to say, I feel like a lot of times people read about neurodivergency and they see, okay, really good with patterns, really good with reporting and things like that. And that's definitely true in some cases, but neurodivergent means so many different things. You could have ADHD, you could have autism, you could have OCD, and all of those being different parts of it react differently. And I think everybody also within themselves is different. So I myself, ADHD diagnosis at 15, I thrive better with social interaction than I do closed off to myself. I prefer working in a team environment, and I feel like I know what I bring to a team, and I also play off of other people's strengths, which don't always include social interaction. So I do believe that individuals with neurodivergencies can excel at social interaction.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And there's a really important point that someone made in the chat here. I think that depends on the mood, situation, my energy status. And we were going to talk a little bit more about how we can actually manage our energy status throughout the day in some further slides. Frankie or Claire, do you want to give a little bit insight into how you feel about this?
Yeah, I agree with Erica as well in that one of my neurospices flavors, I would say, is being dyslexic. And it actually, for me, I think really enhances my ability to be in social environments, connect with other people. But at the same time, one of my other neurospicy flavors is having complex PTSD, which makes big social interactions a lot more challenging. And so, as someone mentioned in the chat, there is this big balance for me of needing to really prepare in advance that I'll be in a social environment. But that preparation to me doesn't necessarily mean I can't succeed in that social environment or even excel in it, if you will. So it definitely depends. But yeah, I definitely don't think that there's an inherent inability for us to not engage in social interactions. Frankie?
One thing we talk about in the autism community is that the autism spectrum is nonlinear. And so it's really it's much more like a color wheel or even a multidimensional cloud. And in that, I find myself very extroverted. I love socializing. It's one thing I love about project management is you do a lot of collaborating. You do a lot of working with teams. In fact, in the PMI, Project Management Institute, we talk about the value of in-person meetings. And if you are not comfortable with in-person meetings, project management is probably not right for you. I love socializing. I'm happy to have 2 dinner dates every night. If I get 2 dinner dates, I think, great, I can do one at 6 and one at 8. And then maybe I can find someone to go to an after party with. But that's personally my flavor, just as you were saying, Claire.
And the chat is popping off. I love that everyone's saying in here. 2 dinner dates a night for me is a little bit too much. I definitely agree with it depends on my energy and mood. I can go and be very social on certain times. And we also have another statement in here that would say it depends on whether the situation, on whether I feel psychologically safe and I can show up as my whole person. And we are going to have a couple of tips on that as well to make work a more psychologically safe environment. So want to just move into the next question here. So I want to ask the panelists, how have you seen embracing neurodivergent strengths impact creativity, problem solving, and overall project outcomes? You want to start with Eric?
Sure. Yeah, so in my line of work, I see a lot of opportunity for neurodivergent strengths, especially when it comes to process building and creative ideation. So neurodivergent teammates, when I think of the various types of neurospaces, it's what types of fresh perspectives can they bring to the table, right? It's not unheard of. It's actually quite often that you are thinking about things quite differently than other people, thinking outside the box, as some might say, and coming up with ideas that lead to more innovative solutions than maybe a linear train of thought might produce. So for me, particularly when designing processes that need to work for a variety of people, I think about the people, but also the roles that they have to play. And if I'm building processes for myself, it might include steps that aren't needed for brains that might think a little differently than mine. So for me, maybe I want to schedule a reminder to do a certain task every Monday, just so I know that it's there and I can check it off. But for somebody who may be on the media side of advertising, they're like, hey, I know I have to do that. Just give me some tasks for things that I don't always have to do or don't always have to remember, instead of seeing the full gamut. The other thing I wanted to say on that is I work quite closely with creatives, and the type of creative that is built off of neurodivergent employees is such an asset in marketing and advertising, where new and exciting ideas can really make or break a campaign. Think about watching the Thanksgiving commercials or the Super Bowl commercials and saying, oh, that is a really great idea, or that's a really neat thing. I can't believe I never thought of that. I wouldn't doubt that a lot of those came from people who are always thinking outside the box. And with the statistic you shared earlier, how many of those came from people who are neurodivergent?
That's fantastic. Frank?
Yeah, I wanted to be sure to mention that neurodiversity is not always a strength. And when people say, oh, it's a superpower, it can be, but it can be a limitation. I learned so much from a book called Unmasking Autism by Dr. Devin Price. Unmasking Autism, if you haven't read it and you're interested in autism, you will be so happy to find this book. And in the book, they talk about how autism is a disability, and it's important to recognize that, and embracing neurodiversity, not just neurodivergent strengths, but neurodiversity for me has meant things like listening to my body. And when I acknowledge and embrace that I am different, and if I adjust my conditions and my environment to honor that, then I can focus better. Then I can be better regulated. Then I can be a better problem solver, more creative, have better outcomes. And when I look around at my teams and I notice the things that I can help adjust with, I think we're going to talk a little bit later about accommodations. That's what accommodations are for. They like relieve the pressure from the distractions or the neurodiversity, like noise canceling headphones, for example. If you can ask your boss, hey, may I have an accommodation? I need noise canceling headphones, because then I can concentrate and show and just shine and blossom in the way that you hired me to. That's what embracing neurodiversity is about for me.
Yeah, Frankie, I just want to comment on that. I think part of my journey in neurodiversity is accepting that I don't need to change and understanding the limitations and how I'm going to work with them and not work against them and try to force myself to change. I think that was one of the reasons I sought out a diagnosis, because for me, that helped that helped give me that permission almost. But again, some people don't necessarily want to be diagnosed because then you can be judged. It's part of your medical records. For me, it was that diagnosis was important for that part of the journey of like understanding, embracing it, and then moving forward from there. Claire, I'd love to learn and hear from you.
Yeah. I was going to say something similar actually, in that my dyslexia diagnosis was also fairly recent and just within this past year. And before that, I kept trying to fit myself into this box of neurotypical behaviors and really leaning into, I just need to try harder, I need to do better in order to be creative or solve problems. And it wasn't until my diagnosis and reading more about dyslexia, because it wasn't something that I even fully understood or knew. But seeing it, similar to you, Zand, really gave me the power to now lean into that and embrace my neurodivergent strengths and pull myself out of that box and lean into these new strengths that I didn't even really realize I had, because I was trying so hard to fit into a box that I physically could not get into because of we think differently. And it really changed the way that I not only saw myself, but how I interacted with my teams as well. And feeling a lot better about being open actually of that diagnosis and really leaning into it to utilize my strengths. So for me, it definitely helped. And because I was able to see how much it was able to change my own success in my life and my career.
I think these are so important and powerful. And the chat is also saying, one person, Kate, mentioned this webinar is already so validating and encouraging. Love it. Can we do this like once a month? And I 100% agree. It's something that we don't necessarily talk about all the time, and we should talk about it more. But I want to also move into the more practical side of organization. So let's get it moving into more of the practical organization tips and how we're gonna talk about two different things. We're gonna talk about one, if you're managing neurodivergent people, here's how to help. And then following that will be, if you are neurodivergent yourself, how to help yourself. So we'll jump into a couple of things here, which is, if you're managing neurodivergent people, how do you start to help them help themselves? Structure the ask being made, I think, is really important. And panelists, feel free to jump in whenever. But some of the quick little tips here are like break tasks into subtasks. If we give a very vague and a very general answer about make a video, what kind of video? What type of, like, how long is the video? When you start to reduce the cognitive overload of your employees, it actually helps them do work a lot better. And also setting expectations around the work as well. Yes, Frankie.
There's another book that's so valuable. It's really one of these that is for a broad audience. It's called Don't Make Me Think. If anyone's heard of it, Don't Make Me Think. It's written by Steve Krug. And he talks about that cognitive burden that we place on people when we try to communicate poorly, and how you can relieve that in ways like using structure, using bullet points in a message and pulling things out. Here's the thing that I'm saying. Here's the thing that I'm saying. Here's the keyword. I'm going to bold those words in this sentence. Here's a short paragraph. Here's a short paragraph. I'm done now. The book is called Don't Make Me Think. It's so valuable for this kind of thing, right? For anybody, not just neurodivergent folks.
And I was just going to add something I really love with Asana is the ability to put tasks in and adding subtasks. That helped me so greatly with an actual recent project that I did. It was this huge global framework across 3 continents. And so a lot of details had to go into it. And for me, my brain, I just can't look at a long list of tasks. I also can't see and necessarily one outcome. Like one of the goals was putting together the recruitment side of this new framework. And I can't picture in my head what those subtasks would entail. So having that ability to put everything written down into Asana really helped me see what the bigger picture was and actually break it down into smaller tasks to make it not just more digestible, but also more actionable before I went into this just like freeze mode of, oh gosh, I'm overwhelmed. There's so many things to do. Where do I even start?
I'm gonna move into the next piece here because I think it does relate as well, which is offering flexibility and individual support for your team members that you're working directly with. So being able to create autonomy in those peak working hours and then collaborating with the individuals to understand what they are looking for or needing, because sometimes we don't necessarily take the time to think for ourselves what we need and what we would be helpful for us moving forward. And like Claire was saying, resources aren't just given to you as you find this out and go about it. Really being more of a detective on the management side. And I do see questions coming in through the chat that we will be addressing on the next slide. So I'm not ignoring you. We're coming back to it. Anybody on the panel want to address any of these before we move on? Okay, we'll move into a third one. So this third one is big for me in managing the teams that I've managed, is fostering predictability, creating really consistent schedules, creating agendas, really starting to think about work from a process standpoint of how do we templatize this is super, super important for when you're trying to build stability into the team. Because I think for me personally, I build stability into the team because although I'm recently diagnosed, I've worked with a lot of ADHD team members, and having things change very rapidly is always very off-putting. Yeah, do we want to move into the next slide, or panelists? Any thoughts?
I would love to go back to the first one just for 1 second. In the chat, Rebecca says, I would love advice on how to talk to senior leaders about your diagnosis. I know we're going to get into this a little bit more later, but she continues to say organizing tasks that work for you and that she's been struggling with her workload and asking for help. I think if you can show a process or like how you like to see tasks, then there's definitely a case for you to then bring it to senior leadership. I think oftentimes when you're working with people who either maybe aren't neurodivergent themselves, or if you're working with people who maybe haven't had neurodivergent employees who've asked for accommodations, they need to be told. So when we're talking about structuring the ask, use that a little bit for self-advocacy too. Set it up the way you would like to see it, however it best makes sense for you, and see if that's a process that you can utilize moving forward. Now, if you are in Asana already, the best part about that is in every project view, you can navigate through and see the same information, whatever way is most comfortable for you. And in that case, you don't even have to really bring it to senior leadership. You can just say, this is how I like to work. And if they would like to see it, that's also great. If you have tools like Asana in place already, there is a lot of flexibility, but I would say don't hesitate to give a model of how you'd like to see something, because I'm sure that there are other people who that same model would make sense for as well.
Yeah, and one of the other things I just want to point out here is that there are likely some managers in the audience and likely some leaders that are invested in bettering themselves and making things better for everyone. These are tasks that definitely will help that. But if you don't necessarily have that in your team yourself, what are some things that you can do as an individual to control how your workload and how your projects are going? So moving into the first tip we have here, which is personal workflow and organization. One of the things that helps me a lot is to tailor what I need to see and when. But a lot of the times you could flip in Asana from list to board view. I manage that depending on how my energy level is at that time. And then there's also building the routines that work for you, going back to what Erica was saying, where if you can show and build a process and then position it and bring it to leadership, that's one way to make things not only better for you, but better for potentially other people on your team as well. Panelists, any thoughts on this one?
Yes. Tailoring what you need to see when. This to me is about noise. There's so much noise in the world, especially when you're autistic. One of the features is processing more information than people around you. And so I'm processing it, and it can be very distracting, and I don't want to look at these things. There's a piece of software that I love that integrates with Asana. It's called Pipedrive. It's a CRM. It's a platform for managing customers and contacts. And Pipedrive is so easy to adjust what fields are showing, what fields you want. Before that, I used Salesforce, and before that, I used something else. And they were so difficult. It was such an uphill struggle to tailor what fields were showing and this thing, what noise was there, and how could I turn it off instead of having to ask someone else to do it. Pipedrive is really intuitive in that way, and I love it.
Yeah, the overall goal we want you to get out of this panel is to be intentional and think about the tools and what you need to have happen. So, Frankie, that's a really important point where the tools that you are using could actually create more noise, and you need to be careful about the tools that you're selecting, and then how do you work with them. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we all love Asana so much. It's because it's very customizable and you're able to do things in it that can bring a lot out of it. I want to move on to our second bullet point here, which is more talking about the communication of needs and support. This is incredibly intimidating to do, right? Being able to tell someone how you're working and your best working styles, and then identifying the boundaries you need to have. One of the ways that I like to do this is by creating a how to work with me guide. And by one person stepping up and talking about, hey, this is the best way that I work, and thinking about that and reflecting on it. And then also making sure that you're still able to be flexible and understand that there are certain times that you have to work outside of your preferred working style, but communicating that allows people to understand where you're coming from. And it's surprising. It's honestly surprising when you put yourself out there and you're vulnerable, people do respond authentically to that. Panelists, any comments on this one?
I think a nice thing to do along those same lines, especially if you are working around any type of, here's a little document on how I like to work, how it's best to work with me. A nice thing to do to also open the door is share that template with whoever it is you're working with, and let them fill it out too. That way, all the pressure is maybe not just on you. You can also figure out ways to better work with, maybe you have a new manager, but that can also be really helpful and break down some of those vulnerable walls.
Yeah, I love that. Being able to share. I think that's the most important thing. You don't have to necessarily out yourself or share your diagnosis, but sharing your boundaries, sharing the things that that you need to be able to be the best version of yourself at work. So important. I see in the chat that someone said our full teams do user manuals on how to work with each other and how do we need feedback and what we need. Love that, Laura. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, just add a little note that works in relationships as well.
Yes. Yeah.
My sweetheart and I talk about our user manuals. And in fact, I was at an event last summer where a friend was hanging out in the morning one time. This person said, how was your night last night? And she said, oh, it was good, but I made out with this guy and we used to be friends and I don't want to hang out with him anymore. And I said, wow, that sounds awful, but it could have been a good time. And she said, yeah, but he just wasn't a very good kisser. And I said, is that the only thing? And she's like, actually, yeah. And I said, you can tell him. And I had this knowledge from being autistic. I'd be like, you can share your user manual with him and just say, this is how I like to be kissed. Try it. And if he doesn't respond well, that's a big red flag if he doesn't take feedback. But if he does, you got something good there. And the next day I asked her, how did it go? And she said, we made out again. It was much better.
Oh, I love that example. That's so true. And a lot of times we're scared to do it. We're scared to say offend someone or feel judged by it. But in the long run, it does come out so much better when you are able to be honest and open and authentic with people. And it's not just work people, it's also your relationships at home. So would love to share a little bit more about the regulation and energy management. I think this is something where when we force ourselves into, like Claire said, the boxes that we can't physically fit in, we burn out really quickly and we don't pay attention to our energy levels because we're saying, we should be able to do this or we should be able to do that. And there's ways that you can actually help yourself be the best version of yourself. For me, one of those things is taking regular breaks. So putting actual recurring tasks into Asana for my breaks and having my list view actually have breaks within it. So I know and have permission to take that break is super important. And then really making sure that your workspace is set up ideally for you. We were doing our drive around yesterday and we were all pulling out our fidget toys at this point. Being able to have a fidget toy, I've been playing with this the whole time, and being able to have a fidget toy helps me to focus. And other things you can do, such as Frankie was talking about previously, that he knit during certain presentations and conferences. And then Erica was talking about previously drawing in the margins of her paper and doodling actually helps her to pay attention. So one of the things I just want to remind people of is that looking away or fidgeting does not mean that people aren't paying attention. So this goes back to what we were talking about with the communication of needs and support. If you start a meeting with, I am paying attention to you, I just have a fidget toy that I play with, it helps me to focus, people are going to 100% understand that. But if you just start potentially fidgeting, they might misconstrue that and judge that in a way when you could have avoided that. I see specs. Specs in the chat. If no one knows what specs are, they're like a little metal magnetic dots that all fit together. I actually don't have an example of it, but they're really awesome fidget toys. Any panelists you want to reach in here about regulation and energy management?
Yeah. About the margins in the paper. So right before I was diagnosed, I was in high school, I was seeing a tutor, and I would draw in the margins of my worksheets all the time. And when I was with my tutor outside of the school setting where teachers have constantly marked me down for really nice girl, but doesn't always pay attention, scene doodling. And I was trying to explain to my tutor, when I doodle, I listen better. And I don't really understand why, because I didn't know when I was 15, and this was eons ago. I was like, but when my hands are moving, I can understand things better. I don't need to watch necessarily as long as another part of me is moving. And I'm constantly squeezing my Neato ball or fidgeting with this. I don't remember its name, but it's like a little snake toy. Because it keeps me stimulated, but it also keeps me regulated. And shortly after that, it was my tutor who told my mother, I think actually, you should have her tested for ADHD. And my mother, who was a teacher at the time, was like, she's not a really hyperactive girl. And he's like, no, it's beyond that, especially for females, which we now know is a very common misconception.
And I want to move into the physical Asana. Like, how do you bring all those tips we're talking about into the Asana world? So one of these is the personal workflow and organization. Visualize things. How do you make things more visual? A tool like Asana can help you flip back and forth from that list and that board view. You can also do color coding for your calendar, potentially, and help you to start the transition easier. Because for me, I really struggle with transitioning into different tasks. But if I'm mentally prepared for what's coming up, I'm able to do that a little bit easier and faster. And I also want Erica to share more about this roll up and the color visualization that in the Asana calendar as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can do this type of view in your My Tasks, but the example here is an actual project, a fake project called Project Management. Within the project, each of the tiles, whether it's stretched upon multiple days or individual days, those are different tasks, because tasks can span amongst a week. They can span however long you want them to. Most commonly, they are a day, though. And in the calendar view, I've always found it really helpful to separate what you're seeing by what makes the most sense. So in the marketing world, if you have Black Friday, Cyber Monday, for example, you might want different tasks that say, okay, this is going to be for Black Friday, this is going to be for Cyber Monday, this is an internal task. In this view here, I think we did an internal task would be yellow, and then a purple task would, let's say, be something for the media team, and the teal task would be for the creative team. And as a project manager, I need to manage projects amongst all teams. So to see where it's separated out makes me figure out where in my day, based on who I'm talking to, needs to know what information. There's other ways to do it too, but I find that if you want to really visualize your day or your week and separate it out by something that's most meaningful to you, you would use a custom field like this and color it how you most want to.
Yeah, and I think the biggest takeaway from all of these is you have to be intentional about thinking about the best ways for you to organize something and not just necessarily jump into it. And then make sure that you are trialing it out, testing it, see if it works. So a couple more tips on the communications of needs. When you start to think about tasks from an energy perspective, you can start to break that down into Asana in a couple of different ways. One of them, for more like people that are on the free plan, you can add tags that have colors attached to them that focus on what time you have. Maybe you have a green tag that's like a 15-minute quick task. Maybe there's a yellow tag that's like 30 minutes for yourself. You can also start to break up that visual Kanban board by attaching images, and maybe you have a couple of standard images that pull out, say, high priority type things. And then one thing I want Erica to talk to a little bit more for a roll-up view is the using fields like the estimated time can also help you organize things. So if you could talk a little bit about this, Erica.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the previous slide, if you could navigate that way for just a second, then we can pop right back to this slide. So the bottom task, it says high energy task 1 hour. So we have the high energy as the red tag. You'll also see underneath it, it has a 2-hour timer on it. That's just an estimated hour section. So in Asana, one of the fields you can add is estimated. You can also do actual time for time tracking. So then it really helps you visualize your day. And if you are a project manager, we can go to the next slide. What I like to do is put together a portfolio per team so you can resource better. So everything on the left that's blocked out by picture and name is a person on our creative team, and the numbers you're seeing are a total of their estimated hours. So whether they want to do this weekly, whether they want to do this daily, once you're assigned tasks, they can go ahead and enter those estimated hours. And as long as it's on in all the projects they're in, this portfolio will roll up all of those hours so I can see who could maybe take on some extra work if somebody else is overloaded. Like you'll see in the middle there, it starts to get real red in our senior art director's time. So can tasks be spread out where there's only maybe an estimated hour and a half of time, or can it be passed to another teammate? This visual is super helpful as a project manager because I'm not putting in the estimated hours for them. I'm saying, how long should this task take you based on all of the information you have and the tools at your disposal so that I can best schedule the projects? And that's a short reason why I love portfolios.
Erica, we did have a question from Sabrina in the audience. How can I view all of my main projects in this portfolio view? This is exactly what I need.
Yeah, so if I'm going to pull up Asana so that I don't skip a step as I'm talking through it, but if you navigate to your portfolio section and you go ahead and create a portfolio, you would go in and you would add work. So start the portfolio. Let's say you're in list view. Click add work, and then you could add in projects. You could add in even other portfolios, all the projects you want. And then if you navigate over to workload, it'll show you either this view that you're seeing on screen, and it defaults to like how many tasks a person has in those projects that you've submitted. But if you have estimated time field or actual time field turned on, you can change that filter so that it is pulling from time instead of numeric number of tasks.
All right, let's move on to our third tip of the day. And just a reminder, these are all examples in Asana, which we love. Most of these you can do in the free version. Some of them, like the custom fields, and potentially the portfolio view might be in a paid version, but there's always ways to work around it depending on what project management system you are in. Moving into regulation and energy management, one of the things I talked about before was setting recurring time tasks for myself so that I see those in my list view and have break time built into my day. So that's one of the things that I do in Asana. And then another thing that I actually do, because one of the questions here that we'll go into a little bit deeper, but it talked about you have so many tasks in there, like how do you actually pay attention to one at each time? I actually augment my physical environment by using light bulbs that change color, and I set schedules for them. So it's also a physical reminder of, hey, I need to take that break that I have in my task. And so the combination of the dopamine hit when I can check off that task when I get back from that break, plus the physical environment change is very helpful for me. And then the other thing that I also have is a visual timer, like one of these guys. I don't know if other people have them, but you can actually set time. I'm actually using it for this webinar right now. But all of those things together help me to take care of myself in a better way. So I want to move into another panelist question. How have you each customized your project management style to accommodate neurodivergent working styles? Erica, one of the things we were talking about before was putting the full task action in the title. So instead of saying add corrections, you would say something very specific. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I think when you see a task and it's action focused, it's easier to understand what you have to do so you can prioritize your day in a way that works best for you. In that same example, instead of saying add corrections, I might say recolor November ads. And it'll be in a project. In my tasks, I have the project field open so I know where the task relates. Having an action makes it much more tangible, and it makes me understand what the ask actually is. So I do that for everybody if I'm assigning them tasks. I try to make it so it's not just like meeting today, client meeting today about so and so. That way you're fully prepared. And then if you do need more context, to click open the task and read the description. I know sometimes when you're working really quickly with people and you're just trying to get tasks into Asana, and hoping that people will just use the platform in the most basic way, it's like, all right, everything they need is in the task description. But you save a lot of time for not only yourself, but your teammates if you're adding as much context as possible into the description. That way we don't have to stop and ask people and disturb not only your day, but the people you have to talk to figure out the task as well. Yeah, I like full task action in the task. And then I also like to tell people, if you can, let's try to make the descriptions a mandatory thing so that there is full context and people don't have to stop their days to go back and forth about one ask.
Yeah, I want to add on to that because got a chat question in here. One of the things that you can utilize to break out those tasks more, create more descriptive task titles, is to utilize the Asana AI that's available in the paid plans, because that'll help you draft out those subtasks. If you don't have a paid plan, utilize something like ChatGPT. It's a great starting point instead of looking at just a blank page and overwhelming huge task. Using AI in that way to brainstorm is super helpful.
And AI, ChatGPT, can help you make your communications more succinct. There's this old quote that we love from Mark Twain, who said, "I apologize for writing you this long letter. I didn't have time to write a shorter one." And that's the same sense from that Steve Krug book, Don't Make Me Think, is write what you're going to say, but before you send it, go through it again and spend some time thinking about it as if you were the reader of it. What's the most important thing? What part is actually not important? How can you say this more clearly, more succinctly? Because if you write everything that you come out with in the first draft and send that, they might read none of it. They might literally read none because you wrote more. And if you write less, they will read some and maybe all of it.
Great point, Frankie. I want to move into advocating for yourself because I think this is an important piece. And then we'll go into a couple of the audience questions. Advocating for yourself, what advice would you give to people on asking for accommodations? I can start kicking this off a little bit because it is so difficult to ask for help because we never want to be seen as weak or incapable or anything, or maybe, people do think I'm not good at social interaction and that's why I'm asking for accommodations. When in reality, once you start to shift your mindset on what help means and that asking for help is a sign of strength in itself, it makes accommodation and like the boundary conversation a lot easier. And you open the doors for other people. Being vocal about what you need helps other people also do the same. Any final thoughts on accommodations, panelists?
Yeah, I was just going to add that it may not seem like it because accommodations can be and are very personal and individualized. Having been on both sides of requesting accommodation, I've been on the HR side, I've been on the employee side. Something that has really made a difference for me as I have continued just having different experiences in different accommodation processes was having a support network while going through the process, because there are companies out there who have great accommodation processes. There are also places out there who do not. And it can be challenging to go through it yourself, especially if you're doing this for the first time. And having someone who you can lean on for support, whether it is someone within your company or a friend, but someone to just help you through that process and remind you that you deserve an accommodation, you are legally required to get an accommodation. Just some of those reminders from another person is also really helpful. Yeah, having someone to support you through that is something I would recommend.
I love that. And that's something we don't think about a lot because we think we want to be individuals,
Independent.
do everything ourselves.
Yes.
But asking for help, tuning into your community is so important. Frankie, do you have any last thoughts?
Sure. This underscores the value of ERGs. If your company has, or if you don't have, and you could create an ERG, an employee resource group for neurodiversity. Like, what a head start you could give each other.
Love that. And we're going to have time for one question that I'm going to grab from this side here. Actually, we actually answered that one. One of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about was society benefits so much from our outcomes as neurodivergents, but is so quick to criticize our unconventional behaviors. And this feels unfair and can sometimes seed resentment. How would you go about this? I would love to hear our panelists' thoughts. Erica, you unmuted. Go for it.
Sorry, I unmuted earlier and then got back.
No, you're right. I have some thoughts on this. I think one of the things, if you're being criticized by unconventional behaviors and starting to potentially seed resentment, I think one of the things is to always remember that people react poorly to things when they're scared. And if they're scared of something, there's something that is not even related to you potentially. So coming at it from, even though it's difficult and it's hard, coming at it from an empathetic perspective and then trying to teach them better ways in order to interact with you is super important. And then also one of the things Claire was talking about is like leaning into your support network. You can also lean into your network at work to help figure out what your relationships are and how to modify those and really bring everyone along to the same place. So if you're experiencing any issues in working at work, it's putting together some of the practices we were talking about before. And I want to make sure that we have time to showcase our panelists, and so that you can go and find them after this panel. I am sincerely blown away. This was such a great conversation. Thank you guys for being a part of this. I'm dropping into the chat now how to find us in the future. Feel free to find us on LinkedIn, on our websites. There's also the Asana Ambassador Program, again, for that resourcing and for joining that community. Even if you are a beginner, they are very open to different skill levels and will help you to skill up and understand that. There's also a bunch of certifications that Asana just dropped. And I believe that one is still free until the end of the year. So make sure you check that out. Thank you so much. Neurodiversity is a part of this beautiful spectrum of human variation. And I hope that the tools we've discussed today are here to empower you. Drop in the chat while we're about to leave, what are you going to implement? What are you taking away? Are you grabbing one of the book recommendations? Let us know. And thank you so much to everyone here.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us, Zan. And
Absolutely.
Thank you.
In the
Awesome.
chat, we were talking about color coding and being implemented. This has been one of the most impactful, helpful, encouraging panels I've ever attended. Thank you, Jessica. Oh, that is so heartwarming. I know that just talking about this content is so important. So thank you all. And we're going to end this now, but feel free to reach out to us. We are here for you. Your
And I
heart.
like that idea of doing this regularly, Zian. Let's talk about that.
I'm down. People liked it, so let's go. Thank you, everyone.